And what I love about that is I've been able to take my experience figuring out how to cook and take it into the rest of my life. You just follow the instructions and you will make it happen, and you'll get there. You just have to take the steps and do it one thing at a time.
On today's episode, we are featuring Sonia Case, who is a voice actor turned producer and a content creator based in New York City. Born in Mexico City to a very Mexican mother and an extremely Midwestern father, Sonia was raised on copious amounts of cheese and love for the Cleveland Browns. As the director of content development and production at Media by Women, Sonia serves as the lead producer and co-host for How She Made It, a career journey podcast that amplifies the accomplishments of women across the media industries. She is passionate about creating content that celebrates our crazy human experience on a global stage. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the exciting journey of Sonia Case. Hi Sonia, how are you?
Hi, Alok. I'm doing all right. Rainy day here in New York, but can't complain.
Yeah, I know. I woke up this morning and it was overcast and rainy, and I was thinking, oh, this is such a nice day to, do some pondering, do some creative work. And here I am, doing regression analysis, plotting charts and graphs. So, yeah, clearly not the plan I had in mind.
In many ways, it does seem appropriate for a rainy Wednesday, though.
Yeah. It's usually I'm just like, I have my cup of chai, spicy
Mhm.
masala chai, and then I'll just do some writing. That's the thing that I like to do on rainy days because that brings out the creative side of me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I prefer the gray weather, like, more than the sunny weather. So
I mean, yeah.
I'm an exception that way, where, like, most people love sunshine and they would move to California in a heartbeat. I was in California and moved back to New York. I'm like, okay, that's too much sunshine to handle. So it's that. Anywho, so I've known you for quite some time now. We have taken some courses together at the new school, so I'm excited to kind of delve a bit deeper into your journey. So tell me, what were some of the events that gravitated you towards choosing acting as your profession?
Well, that's a big question that's going to take us all the way back to, I think, 2010. And I'll try to make it as quick as possible. It all starts with me choosing to go to boarding school. And really what happened there is I'm originally from Mexico. Most people usually go to school for a year. And the reason I decided to stay for the entirety of high school was because they had a theater program. I had the opportunity to audition for shows and be in shows. And what I found is that I really love not so much being on stage, but being someone else and experiencing all these different lifestyles and stories and lives, really. And for an introvert, that, it became a place of relief, of just relief, I think would be the best way to put it. And that's why I decided to study it in school. I went to NYU Tisch. I got my BFA there. I met some incredible people, and that's sort of the short of it.
Right. Yeah. And it's an interesting point that you mentioned that, being an introvert, you sort of enjoy being in front of camera, which is a bit counterintuitive, right? Like people who are more extroverted, who don't mind, projecting their personality to other people, tend to sort of like, find it easy to be an actor. But I found this, even in India, where like a lot of people will do their thing when they are on camera, and then once the camera is off, they become this very shy, very introverted human being. And it's like, well, 5 minutes back you were doing this crazy thing on camera, and now it's just like a different person. So yeah, that's an interesting thing. But so does it get easier to be in front of camera being an introvert, or does it, like, is it still a struggle because, like, there are so many people on sets usually?
It's actually really easy, and I'll tell you why. And I will say I've spent more time on stage than on camera. But that said, it's when you're playing a character, you're not you. And everyone watching, they're not expecting, oh, here's Sonia saying this, here's Sonia doing this. It's rather, here's the character doing this. Here's Maria yelling at her husband, right?
Yeah.
Here's Trish getting drunk at the party. It's so freeing. I remember I was on stage, the first lead role I ever got. I think I was 14 years old, and I was in rehearsal playing this Italian woman. And my director was telling me, like, let loose, let loose, let loose. And all of a sudden I started screaming my lines. And granted, as an actor, you really shouldn't scream so much, but I remember it clicking in my head of, wait a minute, who I am is completely separate from this character. And in this moment, this character is being loud, is letting go. She's not thinking about controlling her volume or controlling her emotions because she's feeling it. She's there. And that's what's so magical about acting. I think I even wrote my college application for essay for undergrad about the magic that it is to be on stage, seemingly completely bare, but actually you're protected because you're not you. And it's the same when you're giving a presentation. It's not about what you're doing. It's about the presentation, right? Which I think is why it's been so easy to carry the skills I developed studying acting into different professional capacities.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's really interesting. A lot of people who make a shift in their career are not able to carry forward a lot of skills or understanding from their previous career, and you see them struggling. But to be able to do that, I think makes a lot of things easier. It makes your journey much more bearable in that sense. But yeah, such a beautiful thing, right? Like you feel like you are exposed, but you are actually protected. And
Yeah.
I think, yeah, well, that's
Yeah.
that's acting wisdom right there, which I don't think
Oh,
I
yeah.
had that perspective before talking to you right now.
I mean, I tend to be a pretty collected person, but I've done some wacky things for acting because it's acting. No one's going to look at what you do. I think I remember one show I was in called Dog Sees God. I had to like get drunk at a party, and I had to like grind with a guy, and like I was like, oh, that would usually be so cringy. I wasn't even doing that in real life. Not my style. But it was the character style. And I'm like, I went up in front of a lot of people I knew, in front of my parents who usually support me. And I rubbed my butt against my fellow actor's crotch. But it was okay because it was part of the scene and it was fun. And after the fact, that didn't reflect on me and it didn't reflect on him because that's the show. It's the story. You do everything in order to forward that story and tell and honor it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would not grind with a guy or a girl for $1 million. So it takes takes a lot of courage and understanding to be able to do that. All right. So now, of course, being a female actor has its own challenges, but more so trying to do that in New York City is especially difficult because so many people, not only across the US, but all over the world, come with these dreams of, making it big in Broadway or, in TV or films. What does it mean to be a female actor in New York City?
Well, I'll say the struggles that female actors face are similar to those faced by actors across all genders. And on one hand, you spoke directly to one of them, which is competition, because New York is saturated with incredibly talented people who are all trying to get a handful of jobs that actually pay a living wage and that are the next step. Which leads me to, I think, the true struggle for actors, especially in New York, which is so expensive, is surviving. It's surviving in this city. Actors are expected to constantly be taking classes, constantly be refining their skills, refining their instrument, because as an actor, your body is your instrument. So that means voice classes, character classes, puppetry classes, workshops with agents, casting directors, constant, because if you're not taking classes, then you're also not networking, and you're not in your art. Because then, as an actor, they say your job isn't actually to act. Your job is to audition. Great, that's fine. Auditions don't pay, which means that as an actor in New York, you're expected to have a survival job. That usually means waiting tables or working at a retail store. But it creates this setup where it's like, okay, you have to work enough at your survival job to pay rent to, again, survive. But you also have to find a survival job that is flexible enough to allow you to go to an audition the next day with really short notice. So it's a grind. It is an absolute grind, and I have so much respect for my friends and acquaintances who are working every day to try and make this happen for themselves, because it's not easy, and it's not for everyone either.
Yeah, yeah. And you hit the nail right on the head when you say that you need a survival job, because an actor's job is to audition. And if you are not auditioning, you're not putting yourself out there. And my sister is an actress in Mumbai. And
Mhm.
so I know the first-hand experience of like how many places she has to be sometimes in a single day to give this different
Yeah.
auditions. She has a bag now of like different looks. So like, okay, this is a professional look, this is a casual look, this is a traditional look.
Wow.
And so anytime they say, because you never know what casting directors might ask you to do on the spot, right? Like they might say, hey, could you do something more uh, you know um, professional or something more casual, because usually casting directors are working on multiple projects, so you might not be fit for what you came in for, but they might consider you for something else. So you need to come up with
Mhm.
characters on the spot. And so usually she's able to request like 10 minutes to do the change and then come back. And yeah, that just gives her more opportunity to showcase her talent, because she knows that how hard it is to land an audition. So once you've gotten it, you don't have to let it go. Like you show your full spectrum of talent, and so whatever connects with them, hopefully, will get you a job. So yeah,
Mhm.
it's that. But yeah, it's a hustle. And I know a friend who studied, I think, biomedical engineering or biochemistry, something like that. And I met her in California. She's originally from Spain, but I was taking a course in
Mhm.
California. She was also doing the same. And she moved back to Spain, and then now she's in London. And the way she manages is that she works night shifts at a chemistry lab, and then in the day she goes out and gives auditions. And I'm like, well, that's crazy,
Mhm.
because you're working entire night, which means you're already exhausted by the time you get home, and then you're sleeping for like 5 6 hours, and then the entire afternoon you're just running around streets of London trying to get a gig. So yeah, it's hard. And as you said, like, it's challenging anywhere. Uh, I didn't know that until I jumped in front of camera, not by choice. I'm painfully aware of how
Mhm.
bad I am as an actor, because I never pursued it. I'm not trained for it. But when I had to do that to save a project, I realized that, oh, it's not simply about just putting yourself in front of camera and delivering lines. There's a lot more that goes into it. So yeah, that's, well, hats off to all the actors who are out there trying to make it work.
100%, because as you say, it isn't just about standing in the right place and saying the right words. It's expressing human emotion and honoring stories and lives, and portraying that as accurately and as faithfully as possible. But in order to be able to do that, you need time for self-care. You need time to process that, to prepare that. And it's, all actors out there who are able to juggle their survival job, juggle auditions, and then still show up and give touching, heartbreaking performances. I mean, I think that's what distinguishes great actors from merely good ones.
So moving forward, now you recently made a shift towards being a producer. What prompted that decision to kind of move away from acting and having a production role?
Yeah, so it actually goes right back to this whole survival job conversation that we were having. Right out of school, I started working at this company called Duke 3D, and basically, what Duke 3D does is they 3D print and scan people and pets. So it was a retail location, and I quickly made my way from just a scanning associate to becoming the New York City retail manager. So I was managing 2 stores in New York City. I was working full time, and but I was really unhappy. I was really unhappy. I was auditioning because it worked out because I was the manager, so I could set my own schedule in that way. But I was absolutely miserable. And I found that what I really enjoyed was working with my team. I loved putting together a team and coaching them and growing towards something, which is what prompted me to find the media management program at the new school. And I knew then that I wanted to make a shift towards something a little bit more stable than acting, because the uncertainty of what am I going to do tomorrow? Where am I going to be tomorrow? How am I going to cover this shift if I can't go in tomorrow? That was really wearing on me. And I had to take a big look at myself and reckon with the fact that this lifestyle of not knowing what you have to do the next day or where you have to be the next day was not for me. I mean, I was losing sleep. I was anxiously, I would wake up anxious every morning. Do I have an email from my agent? Do I have an email from my agent? Oh, they need this ASAP. Oh my God, I have to be in FIDI in 3 hours. How am I going to cover this shift? And that was really wearing me down. But I knew that I enjoyed being on the business end of things. I knew that I enjoyed being at team meetings with the company. I liked being part of forming something. This was a startup. Unfortunately, they did not survive the pandemic. But with that said, having found the media management program, it quickly started to come together that production might be the next logical step for me. That said, I wouldn't say it's any more stable than acting, especially the type of production that I'm interested in. But I think there are a few more opportunities out there for at least consistent gigs that are not available for actors. So unfortunately, I can't seem to pull away from the creative and from just the art and the let's make something together impulse.
Right. Yeah. And I've found this as well, where I found this with my projects all across, like, be it in the US or India, that people who are on the creative side of things, they naturally have this curiosity about the business side of things. And it goes the same for people who are on the business side of things. They want to know more about the creative side of things. For some of them, it's just to perhaps be the better decision maker, or just for the fun of it,
Mm-hmm.
like, just trying to build something from scratch, or being part of something that comes alive on screen in some form, is very exciting for a lot of people. And I count myself in that. Like, I began in a very analytical career. I was in banking, and then now I love writing screenplays. Like, I love coming up with ideas and creating this universe where these characters, which are sometimes
Mm-hmm.
borrowed from my friends or my associates, and I just like add that little twist to those characters, and you get to see them come alive on screen. So yeah, I understand that. And I feel, even as an actor or as a producer, knowing the other side helps you to see the bigger picture, and that allows you to be better at what you're doing. So, like, because I come from finance, I am naturally that much better, I feel, at production, because now I know how to raise funds and how to allocate it and control the cost. Like, I can figure
Mm-hmm.
out ways where I can, save money, be frugal, and still not compromise on quality. So things like that, I think, that's why, despite the grueling hours of production, I kept going in the early years, because it's just like, okay, well, I'm comfortable with the financial part of it, like the money part of it. Now it's only about seeing how it's implemented, right? So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's fun to kind of go beyond what you are expected or supposed to do, and then incorporating that knowledge. So yeah, that's great. Now, so I'm curious to know what kind of projects you are currently producing and what's your process for choosing those projects.
Mhm. So I really started to look into my circle, into my immediate circle of acquaintances and friends, because it's people I went to school with and who I still see and talk to every week, and it's an extraordinary pool of talent who, just like me, is freshly kind of out in the world and trying to get their work out. So right now I'm working on two projects. The first is called Frankengert. This is the big reveal. And I actually came across it through an acquaintance of mine, Amanda Cook. She's the writer. So she reached out to me. She knew I was interested in producing and going down that path. And so she sent me this animated short called Frankengert. And we've been working together to continue to develop the story. And now it looks like it's actually grown into this big thing. And it's really scary, but really exciting too. We're really taking a transmedia approach with it. So we're hoping to expand it into an interactive website, get some games, eventually do some plushies, kind of a collect your Frankengert sort of situation, as well as other shorts and exploring kind of this universe. Because I think the most exciting part about creating things is building out these universes and figuring out what the laws of the universe are. And the people that live in it and the characters that live in it. So that's one. And then the other, Henchman is has been in development, I want to call it, for almost a year at this point. Also with actually one of my closest friends from college. And that is going to be a live action comedy. Yeah, so it's really exciting to start working with friends and with the creators that I value so much. And I will say, I think what's really helped me in this process is that my background, while it is in acting, the training approach that I took and that the program I was in took with Playwrights Horizons Theater School was, in order to be an actor, you need to know how every single piece of the puzzle works. So we were taking playwriting classes, we were taking design classes, we were taking directing classes. Which has really helped me because I'm not just an actor. That's not the background I'm coming from, because throughout my entire training, I had to make my own work, figure out how to do it with as little money as possible. So I'm really excited to enter this new chapter where we have all these skills and we know how to raise money. Now we just actually have to make it happen.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm excited for that. I look forward to both of your projects, and I think I have a little bit of an idea about Henchmen.
Yep.
But yeah, the animation and live action comedy, like they both sound very interesting. Uh, so yeah, what do you think are some of the challenges that a typical producer faces that most people have no idea about? They feel like, oh, that's not going to be an issue, but unless you become a producer, you don't really know that, okay, that's a challenging aspect of it.
Yeah, it's so funny. So I'm going to say two things. One is for me, as I'm starting, as you know, over the last year, I've started really to get to know what the role of a producer is and also how that can be so different depending on the project. For me, the money aspect, which for you, you say you have this background. For you, that's the easy part. For me, I'm like, oh my God, how do I even begin to tackle this in a legal way, making sure I do all the right paperwork? How do we, because it's very different coming from a background of, all right, everyone, get whatever's in your dorm room. Let's pick up some trash off the street. Let's borrow some lights from people and make this happen. That's not how it works in the real world, because while we could do it that way, we want everyone to get paid for their time now, right? We want to get a return on this investment. So that's, I think, something that is harder than I thought it would be. And then on the flip side, I think something most people might not realize is difficult about being a producer. I think a lot of people have an idea of the producer as just the money person doesn't really interact with anyone. And I think that's one kind of producer. But for smaller productions, a producer is has their I'm so sorry. A producer has their hand in every pot. A producer is in charge of really assembling a team. And I think what's tough is assembling a team that works well together, and that can really collaborate to make something. And I think that's something that is often underestimated in terms of what a producer does and what their responsibilities are. I think that's where the magic lies. That's the best part.
Yeah, yeah. And it's so true that you mentioned about like smaller production, especially on an indie level, that producer is doing everything. And for
Mm-hmm.
me, I naturally had that curiosity to see how the production process works. So I didn't mind doing those things where, like, you have to call up the restaurant and, say that, hey, we are here and we need like 10 pizzas and five,
Mm-hmm.
manchow noodles. Can you just send it to us? To, like, actually making coffee for the actors on set while they are between the shots and trying to refresh a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, for a lot of people it seems like, well, producer is the guy who shows up in a suit and just writes checks. Well, it does eventually get to that point, but I mean, on an indie level, and especially when you're starting out, you are doing everything. You are driving around people, you are picking them up,
Mm-hmm.
you are getting them food, you are doing everything pretty much, as you said. And that was a real eye opener for me, because it's not only about managing the money aspect of it, it's also about managing people on set. And having a
Mm-hmm.
team that works well together is such an important part of getting everything done on time and within budget,
Mm-hmm.
because I've run into those situations where I had a camera crew from Canada come to Mumbai for a film project. And it's just like, because they were so shocked and overwhelmed by the city and the way things are done, that it took some time for the whole team to get used to that. Oh, okay, so this is how things work here. But for first couple of days it was hard to get that productivity out the door, and it's just like, well, okay, now we understand. So that was an important lesson for me, that okay, if your shooting is supposed to begin on a particular date, get them, like, 3 or 4 days before. Let them just be, let them recover. Because when you're trying to save money, it's like, okay, you come, you rest for a day, and then you start filming. Just not enough for most people to get over the jet lag and really understand that, okay, it's a different time zone, different place, different things. So yeah, it's yeah, needs a lot of patience, I would say. So yeah, it's yeah, I think that's a great way to put that. Yeah, and so an interesting thing about you is also that you pursued HBX Core, which is a program by Harvard Business School online. Was that a conscious decision to upgrade your skills, or was it something that you felt like, okay, might as well just do it along with something else that I'm doing?
Yeah, I did the HBS online, the HBX Core program, right after, I think, I want to say about half a year out of college, which is when I was really starting to figure out, okay, what's working for me, what's not working for me. And I think at that point I knew that I didn't want to just do the acting thing until, something happened. And so I wanted to really start and build out those skills. I had an incredible education at NYU, an incredible arts education and a humanities education. But what was lacking for me was a business education, and so really it was a practical decision. I had the time. I was working a couple days a week, and I was auditioning, and I did the course. And I will say it wasn't easy for me, because for many of these things it was kind of starting from zero. I hadn't taken a math class since high school because I was studying acting. But I'm really glad I did it, because it prepared me for the program I'm currently in ways I couldn't have expected at the time and as I was doing it. And I think it was a wonderful introduction to accounting. Now I know what a debit and credit is. I didn't know that before. And it's so useful, right? So I'm really happy I did it, but it was fully to build out those skills. I think, like you, I see that you're always taking classes, and I feel similarly. I will never stop going to school. At this point, I'm thinking, all right, what do I need to do to get my MBA in 5 years? Moving towards it, because I think, just like acting, you're working on your instrument. In real life, you're constantly building skills. The world's changing, especially right now. I mean, we're at I think, a pivotal moment in history.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's absolutely an important thing to consider for anybody. Because the world is changing so quickly, even within a particular industry. It doesn't matter whether you are on the creative side or you are on the uh, business side of things. Things are moving so quickly that you always have to upgrade to new skills to stay relevant.
Yep.
And I didn't know that like it would be so intense, because with finance it's like, okay, two plus two is has been four for like since the beginning of humanity, right? Like that's very properly rooted in the principles of math in that sense. So like there's not much you can do in terms of like the moving parts. You can find like new techniques to analyze and new rules and new ways of doing things, but it's still sort of like restricted to that. So when the blockchain thing happened and cryptocurrency blew up, it's like, okay, now everybody's trying to model that, okay, if a business were to accept cryptocurrency as the standard form of payment, how do you build projections? Because what you made in profit today might turn into
Mm-hmm.
loss tomorrow. So it's like moving very quickly. So do you build a
Mm-hmm.
hedge? Like, do you build a mechanism where your downfall is restricted? So it's fascinating. And now I kind of see the point of the crypto enthusiasts. But I mean, yeah, well, that's a separate discussion. That's a separate universe altogether. But it's just, yeah, now it's like that's the new frontier, that okay, how do you incorporate those things as it becomes more and more mainstream, and what does it mean for smaller businesses,
Yeah.
because big businesses can absorb losses for years, at a stretch, but small businesses do not have that, like if like the pandemic has shown us that. uh, so yeah, it's exciting. And
Yeah.
yeah, I feel I really admire that about people, especially within media, who understand that okay, things are moving quickly and you need to stay on top of things. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, well,
Oh
if
yeah.
you're considering MBA, I might have a few inputs for you. Given that I was initially planning to do that, but
Great.
things changed. So yeah, I also have some sample essays which might
Uh-huh.
help you. So if like whenever you choose to do that, let me know. I'll be happy to help.
Absolutely. At this point, I'm like, I like getting degrees. Can I just be in school forever? It's so much easier. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, yeah.
Just kidding. But it's true though. Like, especially in media, but, I'll quickly say we're right at the point where it's like, is streaming network, what direct, like it's changing so quickly. And I mean, any business that is, that uses technology heavily, which is, I feel like at this point, all businesses, like you gotta stay on top of it. And when you're down, like right now, it's tough to get hired places. I know I'm constantly looking for other internships and other opportunities. Um, Keep taking classes, especially, LinkedIn Learning, YouTube. You can learn anything. Just keep learning, keep building out those skills, because it's people are always looking for people that know what's up and what's new.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I'm challenging myself to sort of finish this certification that has this inbuilt component of how to manage your projections or your business forecasts when
Mm-hmm.
a form of payment which is supposed to be static is now variable, right? So yeah, so I'm really excited for it, and I've set this goal, so every day I'm keeping myself accountable for that, like okay, I need to share my progress so that way I'm accountable, so that I don't slack off and
Nice.
fall off the wagon.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's fun. uh, all right, so moving forward, this is a bit of a loaded question, but what has been the most difficult decision of your life so far?
Well, can I just say that every time I sit down at a restaurant and look at the menu, it feels like the most difficult decision of my life. Um, But in all seriousness, I will say I think I'm blessed in the sense that up until this point in my life, I haven't had to make any truly difficult decisions. There have been shifts in my life, but I've sort of kind of gone with the flow of things and let myself be taken to, presented with these new opportunities. What I will say, a decision that I grapple with every day is my initial decision to stay at my boarding school for more than a year and therefore to fully move to the US for boarding school, for college, and now for life, really, for my career, and leaving Mexico behind. That's something that I grapple with every day. And along with that, every day I sit here and I go, wow, I love my life in New York. I love this city. But I also missed out on 4 years living with my family and living with my parents. Do I want to go back and be closer to them in their later years? Do I want to go back and be with my family? Now,
Yeah.
I will say they do live in Southern California, which is probably likely that I will live there at some point. So, maybe the decision will be made for me. But that's something I would say as a gradual decision that happens. I think the other thing might be, choosing to leave acting. But that actually wasn't so much a choice as just a natural and gradual transition, is how I describe it.
Yeah. 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 I think, anyone who has moved away from their hometown or where they've spent considerable amount of time, or even long enough to kind of build a connection with people and that place, it always sort of has that feeling of nostalgia where you always want to go back and explore that. And I feel that now more than ever, because I have not been able to go back to India in, I think, more than 2 years, 2.5 years at this point. And
Mm-hmm.
usually before pandemic, it was the
Yeah.
case that I would at least go back once a year to spend time with my friends and my family, and just kind of feeling that feeling of being around people that love you and that care for you, right? And now I feel like, it's sort of like slipping away from my hands, because due to COVID, and situation is much worse right now, but as even like couple of months back, I felt that, okay, I want to be with my family members and I want to spend time with them. uh, and you see so many things happening, right? Like my cousin became a father, so I have a niece now, so I
Mm-hmm.
haven't met her. They just celebrated her first birthday, so I couldn't be there for that. A lot of my school friends became parents. They have their kids now. So I just feel like, okay, I'm doing so well in my career and things are working out great, but I just feel like there's this other whole, like, side of my existence that's
Mm-hmm.
sort of slipping away from my hands. I, at some point, like, hopefully if the cases go down in India, I want to go back and spend some time.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, right now things are pretty crazy, so doesn't make sense
Stuff.
for me to go back right now. Yeah. uh it's just like up until now I was waiting to
Yeah.
get the COVID vaccine, and now that I've gotten it, it's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
things are bad in India, so I cannot go. Who knows? Anywho, but yeah, it's these are difficult decisions. And as much as you can convert like your previous career into furthering your new career, it's always difficult to make that transition, because a lot of people are not able to survive that transition. I know I so many times gave up on, like, okay, this podcast thing is not working, or this media thing is not working. I'll just call it quits. But then something or the other happens, and that just keeps me going for, let's say, another few weeks. And then something happens. So it's a cycle of, like, should I quit right now, or like should I just go on for a couple more weeks? But yeah, I think Southern California sounds nice. It's very close to Vegas also, right? So
Yeah, it is. It is. My only thing is, I feel like East Coast, you're like, oh, am I risking hurricanes? And then I feel like I'd rather risk a hurricane than a fire gobbling me up. But That's a climate change conversation for another day.
Yeah, yeah. No, that was another thing. I'm like, okay, I can handle snowstorms and I can handle hurricanes. Okay, but I what I cannot handle is earthquakes and forest fires and stuff like that,
Mm,
and the traffic in LA. So, uh, yeah, New York.
right.
Yeah, it gets crazy, but people still keep moving. Like in LA, it's just like madness. I once
Yep.
I once did a trip from Union Station to UCLA, and I was supposed to get there in 40 minutes, but it took me 2.5 hours. And that was like, okay, I'm not moving here because I'll always be
No,
late
thank
for,
you. No, thank you.
yeah, I'll be always late for my business
Yeah.
appointments.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just that.
Hmm.
Now, it's pretty evident from your Instagram feed and your Instagram stories is that you love cooking, you love experimenting, and it's not just the end
Mm.
product. You like to walk people through the process of like before and after, or like step one, step two, step three. How did you develop the passion for cooking?
Well, I have to be fully honest here. I owe my love of cooking to my partner Jack. I previously never cooked much for myself, and when we first started dating a couple of years ago, I'd never believed him. But turns out he's a really good cook. He loves cooking, and he loves cooking shows. And all of a sudden, I had watched I think like 15 seasons of Top Chef in a row, and that really got me excited to cook. And I think we started with some. My mom would started sending me like HelloFresh boxes, and that's when it really clicked. Like, oh, if I just follow the instructions right here in this HelloFresh sheet, I can make something pretty darn good. And so then I would find find these recipes and start cooking them, and then I'd be like, look, I cooked. I will say my partner does not enjoy recipes at all. He has a really great intuition when it comes to cooking, but I will definitely say that the pandemic, when it struck in March, we were in I think media ethics together at that point, and I went
Yeah.
back to San Diego to see my parents. That was going to be, I thought I'd be there 2 weeks. I ended up being there for I think 4 months. And I had access to a much bigger kitchen than my tiny New York one. I had access to a fully stocked fridge, and I had access to Julia Child's cookbook, Mastering the Art of French Cooking, as well as Kenji Lopez Alt's The Food Lab. And I'm really good at following instructions. And so what I really learned was you can find the quote unquote hardest dish to make. And if you just follow the instructions, you can make it. The, famous boeuf bourguignon that takes like 8 hours, you just follow the instructions. I mean, this for New Year's, I made a Julia Child's beef Wellington. Also, it's a 2-day process. You just follow the instructions. And what I love about that is I've been able to take my experience figuring out how to cook and take it into the rest of my life. You just follow the instructions and you will make it happen, and you'll get there. You just have to take the steps and do it one thing at a time. And that's been, I never thought that cooking would influence my, kind of mindset in that way, but it has.
Yeah, yeah. And cooking that way is weirdly therapeutic for me because it allows me, again, like, the way it is with writing screenplays, that you can mix and match and combine things that usually people wouldn't feel like, oh, this
Mhm.
two things could be combined, or you could experiment with them. But it's become this weekend activity for me where I just like come up with random crazy ideas, and sometimes things even turn out to be edible. So
Oh, yeah.
and if they are not, they turn into rat poison. So it's a win-win either way. so so
Yeah.
yeah. And you know it's so weird that I kind of rediscovered my connection with my mom, because once I learned
Mm.
how to cook, you have to learn. I mean, like most people who move to the US from other countries usually do it in the hopes of, like, having a better lifestyle and having a better
Yeah.
life in general. But the journey
Hmm.
to like getting to that point, once you arrive in the US and getting to that point, like that journey, you have to do a lot of things yourself. So when I was in India, didn't have to worry about laundry. I didn't have to worry about food. I didn't have
Yup.
to, yeah, worry about any transportation stuff. Like, I had a car with a driver who would drive me around
Yeah.
anywhere. My mom would cook. And, there was a guy who took care of laundry. So so you have to focus on those things
Nice.
on all by yourself. And that's when I started having discussions with my mom that, okay, how do you add this flavor, or what are the ingredients with this, and how long do you cook? And that's when my mom felt like, oh, my son is mature and sensible now, because he's talking about responsible things and not, throwing weird tantrums as I used to do it
Yeah.
back in India. So it just helped me rekindle sort of a different sort of, connection with my mom, which I didn't have until the point I moved here. So it's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, cooking is fun.
Yeah, that's funny that you mentioned. Yeah, no, it's funny that you mentioned that transition. I had a very similar experience, kind of moving from Mexico and leaving Mexico. All of a sudden, I'm like, wait, how we're doing my own laundry? What? Like what? And for my mom too, actually. So now she left Mexico a few years ago. She lives in San Diego now. And we had always taken for granted all the Mexican food that we had around. Every day we had a different type of very authentic Mexican food. We had our dear Lulu, who still works with my family down in Mexico, and we took that food so for granted. I knew I was going to have enchiladas, at least once a week, or mole or whatever. And now my mom and I together, we've been, we WhatsApp Lulu by video, and we go, right, how do we make the salsa again? Like, what do you do with the chilies? Because it's been really fun to kind of rediscover how to cook real Mexican food. Because while there are a few places that sort of get close, it's not never the same, right? And I'm sure you feel the same with Indian food.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, purely because of, like, the way ingredients are made here, even like salt. Salt, the way
Yep.
it's processed here in the US is very different than it's done in India. And so, like, the same
Hmm.
amount of salt in anything that you put in would have two very different flavor profiles. And so I learned that once I
Wow.
moved here, that okay, because there's a certain process. Sometimes certain brands have, a certain quantity of salt which is too concentrated, which means it's very salty for that kind of ingredient. But for some other brands it's more mild. So now I'm conscious of the brands also that I pick when I want to experiment. Like, okay, do I go with like a generic supermarket salt, like Crasdale or something, or should I go with like the Morton, like, which is more refined and more, like, loaded with flavor for the same quantity? So yeah, and it's fun. I like to experiment, and so it comes out really well. uh all right. So now, the one thing that we have in common is that we worked on this project called Media by Women. It's a non-profit, but the project was called
Mhm.
How She Made It, and I was part of the pre-production team for season one. Uh, how has been your experience so far with Media by Women?
Yes, absolutely. Wow, it's a big question because Media by Women has turned out to be such an incredible community and network for me, and for all of us, especially in these times where we're all sitting at home. It's really been an honor to find that incredible group of people to work and collaborate with. And my journey with Media by Women, it all sort of happened. I started as a video intern, literally just because I had a premiere on my resume. I was actually interested in production and pre-production, but I turned out that I was the editor. And as we shifted from it being a video interview series to a podcast interview series, that's where my skills as a voice actor really came into play. Because as a voice actor, you record a lot of your auditions at home, and you have to be able to edit basic things. So what was great is I actually got to really sharpen my audio editing skills as we went into season one. I also ended up doing the voiceover for all the promos and the intros and the outros, and it's been incredible to see how we've grown from season one to season two. So we just finished releasing season two a couple of weeks ago, and we learned so much in terms of how to record in a remote audio environment. Right? We we practice sending people mics, and it turns out that the cheaper, decent mic doesn't work with half of the computers. All right, back to the drawing board. How are we going to get the best quality audio? And we're still learning, but it's been such a great opportunity to meet different women in the media industry, which is what we're doing with How She Made It this season. For season 2, I'm actually one of the hosts. We've narrowed it down. So we have 3 different hosts. For season 3, we're going to have 3 other hosts. And it's been really cool to be part of this growing thing, and to have gone from stage 1 back in the summer when you were involved with Media by Women, Alok, where we were really figuring out what this was, to now stage 2, where a lot of the people that were there at first, a lot of the leads, have now moved on to other positions, and we're really, really happy for them. But now, we want to keep this going, right? We want this to continue breathing and evolving. So I'm really excited to see where we go next, especially as we've built other properties like the Media by Women Fast 5, which will be coming up. We've experimented with a few webinars. We have a TikTok. Definitely check out the Media by Women TikTok. And yeah, it's really a wonderful community for women and really all media professionals alike.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the reason why I wanted to be a part of it. It's that uh Media by Women was taking concrete steps to sort of recognize that, okay, women are at a distinct disadvantage when it comes to careers in media. And by making these resources available to other aspiring women, and even men for that matter, you are essentially trying to bridge this gap where, like, it seems like, okay, it's this far-fetched goal, and I don't know how I could approach somebody and get better insight into having a particular job position or the kind of skills that I need to have. Uh, I saw that it could have that real impact, and it has had that. Uh, and so that's why I felt like, okay, if I could be a part of it in the sense that I could apply the skills that I've been doing with my company for Media by Women, then it's awesome. And I would say this about the promo, that your voiceover voice is one of the sort of the richest, like, fulfilling, wholesome voice I've heard, as far as the voiceovers go. And like, it just shows how good you are, because there's this certain
Thank
flow,
you.
there's this certain, like, zest in the way you recorded that intro that left an impression on me. And so, yeah, I this is something that I wanted to ask you for a long time. What would you recommend for me to become better at my voice? Because I've done few voiceover gigs, and I've dubbed for my own films and stuff like that, and I host a podcast, so I can adapt my voice to the way somebody needs it. But yours is like on another level, and I want to get there. So what advice would you have for me if I have to achieve that?
The number one thing I will say is 2 things. First, warm up. You always want to warm up. So find, there are a bunch of different vocal warm ups online, but, even sitting down for 2 minutes and just inhaling for 5 seconds, holding for 5 seconds, exhaling for 5 seconds, holding for 5 seconds. That's really going to help not just strengthen your diaphragm and your breathing, but also keep you from like speaking up here and just help that voice drop down. And the second thing I will say, when you're doing voiceover for something, you're giving the copy of, this product is great, buy it. So what you want to do is you always want to picture, you're always saying it to someone. You're not just reading it. So I'm saying it to my mom. Mom, this product is great, buy it. Or I'm saying it to Linda. This product is great, buy it. Any number of things, but you want to have someone in mind, and you want to play around with inflection. I guess I will say one third thing that really helps, and you might have seen it right now. We're seeing each other on camera, using your body.
Yeah.
A lot of people make the mistake in voiceover of just like freezing everything and then just kind of talking up here. But it makes it so much easier, if you throw a shoulder shrug in, or just use your hands, obviously without hitting the mic or making too much noise. I don't think you wear too many bracelets, but bracelets tend to be an issue. But it's really about warming up and using your body and talking to someone. Those are the three things. Because when you do a voiceover, especially like a commercial gig, the number one note you'll get or breakdown you'll get in the copy is conversational. Conversational. And how you're going to get that is use your body and say it to someone. Have someone in mind that you're saying it to.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's a wonderful advice because, the lesser known fact about me is that I was training to be a dancer for 4 years in India.
What?
Yeah,
What?
yeah,
What?
yeah, yeah. I can do hip hop, salsa, and contemporary, and of course Bollywood. That
Wow.
goes without saying. But yeah, hip hop, salsa, contemporary. I'm good. Yeah. So yeah, I was trained in this dance forms for 4 years, and so that also requires a lot of visualization because when you're performing in an auditorium,
Mhm.
all the lights are on you, so you cannot see the audience. It's dark, but you still have to imagine like a certain point,
Yep.
or like a certain area when you're trying to, like, do a certain kind of performance. And so I understand how to visualize something and incorporate that into your body language. And so whenever I work with people where I'm doing the voiceover, I usually do this thing where, like, if it requires a higher pitch, I'm like, I do this and then I do this. So like, okay, it goes high and then it comes down. And then, like, when it requires more
Yep.
depth, more bass, I'm like, okay, I can then do this. So it's like, when I do that, sometimes people get confused, like, what is with your hand? I'm like, oh no, that's for me to understand when to go low and when to go high.
It's the number one thing. Like a big that's huge, Alok. And for obviously, people listening can't see it, but what he's doing is he's moving his hand along. And I've actually used this a lot with whenever I help other people record promos, especially for Media by Women. A lot of people have a vocal habit where they'll finish a sentence. So here I am finishing this sentence. So they drop the ends of sentences. So even just, I'll have people just even like do a fist pump or just raise their hand as they're saying the sentence because the voice will follow. That's spot on. Like, keep doing that because that's exactly it. Your voice follows it. And I had no idea that you trained to be a dancer. So you definitely get this movement thing. I mean, Alec, even just getting a body warm up in before doing a voiceover session or a podcast recording does all the difference.
Yeah, yeah. And I realized how important it is to match your voice with what's happening on screen. You must have seen this clip of Hugh Jackman, running on treadmill while he is recording for
Mm-hmm.
Logan, I think, the movie like that he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pretty fascinating clip
Mm-hmm.
because, like, to simulate the breathing of, like, on screen running that he does,
Yeah.
is actually running there and saying dialogues. And I'm like, wow, who knew voiceover was such an intense physical job as well?
Oh yeah, and especially for ADR, which is kind of what Hugh Jackman's doing there, and that also applies to when you're doing dubs. Um, it requires a level of accuracy, and I remember once I did an exercise where I was dubbing this like really like emotional French film into English, and just getting I mean, there's so much nuance, especially when it's, not animation or a commercial, but you're voicing a real person, even if it's voicing yourself after the fact, because you have to do an audio pickup or something. And just the every little
Yeah.
breath you have to pay attention to, every movement, every intention. I mean, it really is an art, underappreciated art sometimes, I think.
Yeah, yeah. No, I had more trouble, doing my own voiceover for the film that I was part of rather than, actually doing it, like filming the scene on a location. So yeah, I was not
Yep.
prepared, but now I'm better trained for it, I think. All right. So my last question to you is, what are some of the exciting projects that you're working on, and what can the listeners and viewers expect from you going ahead?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, Frankengert is an animated short that I think will be the first of my projects to really come to life and into the public eye, and I'll make sure to keep everyone in the loop as that starts to take a better form. But I think more immediately, we're working on season 3 of How She Made It at Media by Women. We're really, really excited about this season. It's this next iteration. Every time we're getting just really figuring out kind of who we are. And with season 3, we have such incredible, diverse guests from all these different industries that we haven't touched on before. So yeah, season 3 of How She Made It, I think, is the immediate future for me.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's a very well produced and very well crafted podcast, and one of the few ones that really address on an underlying issue in the industry right now. So yeah, it's fun when, like, a bunch of people just get together and have an unscripted, candid conversation, but actually having a personal experience on top of like an actual media industry issue. I think is a really great concept. So yeah, I'm looking forward to season 3 of How She Made It. And yeah, just talking to you today reminded me that I need to hire you for an audio drama that I'm developing, and so you would be perfect for a character that I have in mind. More on that in future. I'm just about
Yes.
finalizing the script for that, but hopefully towards the end of the year we'll see. But I'm making this commitment on record so that uh, I can sort
All
of
right.
stay true to that promise. Uh, Great. Okay. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences, Sonia. And I'm glad we finally had the time to catch up and, share your journey with the viewers and listeners.
You too. Thank you, Alec. This was great.